Alright guys, ran out of memory again. So, back to where we left off. We're going to trim the excess from these wires. Sorry guys, I thought I knew where the tool was, but I didn't. So once you get these trimmed, then you can actually go ahead and solder them and slide some heat shrink over the top. So we'll go ahead and get that going. And while the iron is heating back up again, we're going to go ahead and get this other side prepped, which is going to be the positive side. And you've probably already figured out that the positive side will be tied together in this case. Now, you notice that these are staggered a little bit, the way that they're positioned. Obviously that's on purpose, so that when they lay down in this channel, they're not going to take up quite as much room. So you'll want to do that intentionally, of course. So we just gotta get that thing to stay there. And then on this positive side, I'm going to go ahead and trim back so that it's just shy of the first resistor. So we can just discard that. Of course, I'll keep it for some other project, but a normal human would discard it. Alright, so just take that, strip it back. Take this one, strip it back, approximately the same amount, a little bit longer than what you would normally do, because you're going to be wrapping this around the other servo cable when you free it up. So I'm going to show you how I do this. Just take those together, and you're basically going to take and have that copper all tied together. Once it's tied together, resist the temptation to tin that. You don't want to tin it yet, you'll tin it later. The other thing is, I'm going to just demonstrate. You see how they're going to line up, boom, boom, boom? Because this is going to mostly get cut off when we get ready to tie them. In fact, I'm going to bring this one back just a hair, because it's going to help us later on with the finished product. So we'll go ahead and cut this wire back. Just peeling off the extra copper here. Come back over and finish that adjustment. If you guys are thinking about doing this and you don't know how to solder, maybe not the best idea. But soldering is really not all that hard. You just need some practice like anything else. Use a hot soldering iron. Don't use one of those guns. Well, I guess some people really like the guns. I prefer the pencil style. You just kind of get that lined up with your loop again. Bring it around. Now obviously, if you ever have to go back in and fix this, it's a real pain in the butt. So what you're going to want to do is never ever ever have to do that. Believe me, I've done it. It's a huge pain. Alright, you get the idea. Alright guys, back with the soldering iron here. Just unplug it, carry it over so you don't have to drag extension cords everywhere. Just get a little heat on there. Let the solder flow in the joint. Don't let it do it when it's resting on your foam, or you're going to ruin your foam, of course. Again, a lot of this stuff, guys, I don't mean to insult your intelligence. It's very obvious, but just being that it's a tutorial, the nature of a tutorial and all. I know most of you guys know all this stuff. So that's that, and then you can get a pretty close look at those. Now I'm going to put a little heat shrink over those. Okay guys, so you can see I'm just throwing this heat shrink over. And normally you'd want the heat shrink to cover both sides, but in this case, you'll understand here in a minute why we're not doing that. Because we have to go into the servo wire here in a minute. So I'm going to heat shrink these up real quick, give it a little bit of heat. Apologize in advance if I'm coming out of picture here. I'm trying my best to kind of keep my eyes in two spots at once. All right, and we'll zoom out here a little bit. So now we got to have the channel, because in order to cut this, we need to know exactly where to cut it. So the next step is going to be get that channel cut in there. And the way you're going to do that under normal circumstances, you're going to use the sharpest, newest X-Acto knife you have lying around, and make it look as neat as you can. You're going to go fairly deep at first, and then you're going to actually go a little bit shallower as you come up close to the channel that's already there, and you're going to stop just shy. Then you're going to take that nice bladed, and you're going to get your crappy bladed one like this. You're going to heat it up with a torch again. You're just going to heat it a little bit past, you know, so it can open up this channel for you a little bit. It's starting to cool off, so just do a little bit extra heat there. And you're just basically opening up a channel so you can ride your wires through, because you don't want to have to ram jam all this stuff in there super deep, because you will eventually just kind of start deteriorating the quality of your wing. You don't have to cut a channel, but I like the finished look, and I encourage you to do it that way as well. Get yourself a small flat screwdriver. Take the bottom one first, plug it into the hole, and just work it down. If you think about it, if it's possible, go ahead and put the red wire up, because the red wire will be a little bit easier to hide with white tape, because this has a white wing. But you know what? I don't really think it's going to be that big a deal, because we have a brown wire here. It's already dark. The idea is the lighter, the better in this case. So you're just forcing this into the groove. And once you're in the groove, then you can take and go ahead and seat it down a little bit further. Got to do this twice as deep as you think you need it, because of course you've got, you know, your two sets of wires. And an observant person would be able to realize that you could do this all inside of here. The trouble is, in the servo pocket, you've got, you know, all these moving parts, and, you know, remember, if you decide to have a failure of this solder joint and it shorts out, you're going to lose your receiver potentially. So you need to be very mindful about that, and don't screw around and get it wrong. You have to get this right, and you aren't going to get a second chance. I have had planes crash, and when I say planes crash, I mean I crashed them. And the wires have stayed intact. In fact, they usually kind of hold the wing together, because they're a little bit stronger, even though they're malleable or ductile as copper. They will eventually break, of course. Okay, so now a little bit more of a close-up here on the servo pocket. You see how I've got my control horn here. Obviously you want to test for clearances, but what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to open that aileron all the way down, and I'm just going to push these wires down. And here in a little bit I'll actually take just a drip of CA and just kind of hold it. That way I know it's where it's going to be. I don't have to worry about that. But you do have to have your lights positioned. And when I say the lights, I mean like the LED still has to be positioned permanently before you do that step. So just showing you that kind of as we go. Alright guys, so now the moment of truth. And when I say the moment of truth, that's happened 4 or 5 times probably. But this red wire, turns out that the differential in height made a difference on where these ended up together. And that's part of the reason why I probably should have waited to do that, but I didn't. So we'll go ahead and just fix it now. Clip off the part that's tied together. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring those back to approximately where you want them when they're going to be lying in that channel together. And then you're going to strip them back here in a minute, so you don't want to lose too much, because then it's going to be difficult to work with. Not that any aspect of this is particularly easy. But make it as easy as you can, or you won't ever want to do it again. And don't be afraid to pull these wires out of the channel. It's just kind of nice to know where they're going to ultimately line up. When we're done, we'll throw just a little bit of CA in that crack to kind of keep the wire where it needs to be. Okay. Now, the important part, of course, is going to be where we actually pull out this servo wire. And what we want to do is we want to bring that up so that we can work it. So you can go into this channel here with an X-Acto knife or a flat-bladed screwdriver, and you just kind of pull it out. If you've ever repaired a servo from a Horizon product, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Real easy to get out. And if you're careful, you can tug, and sometimes you'll get a little bit of slack from the inside of the fuselage there where they go through to the front. Now you do need your sharp-bladed X-Acto knife for this step. And remember, we're going to be tapping into the red line, which conveniently it's right in the middle of the other two. So you're going to have to take, and usually a good place to start your split is where you think you're going to be stripping the wire anyway, just in case you would chafe it through to the other. But in my case, I've had good luck. I don't usually chafe into those. Okay? Just constantly keep checking where your red wires are going to line up in this step, okay? Because you don't want to undo any more than you have to, okay? Because the more you undo, the more crap is going to be separate later on. Okay, now we need to separate the yellow from the red now also. Now, if this was a Futaba brand, of course you'd have white and red and black, but since this is a Spectrum brand, it's going to be the well, I guess it doesn't really matter what brand it is, but if it was Futaba, they would typically be red, white, and black. Okay, so now we've got that red wire exposed, and basically we're going to strip this back. We're just going to bite the cable. We're not going to strip it. We're going to pull on the cable, and look at that. There's copper. We didn't even have to cut one of those leads. So now I'm going to twist these up together. And this is where tangling becomes a big problem, guys. Look at all this crap that's got to lie together at the end. Just be careful. Do your best. Try to make it neat as you can, because if you don't, it will be a real pain in the neck later. So, in fact, I'm already kind of feeling a little bit of the pain in the neck as it is. And remember, once you drop this into the channel, it's going to want to kind of change its position slightly. So looks like these two are kind of fighting me a lot right now. You do not want a ton of copper exposed on these, though, because it's just more that you're going to have to tape over later. And again, if this broke off, it's not going to hurt. Your servo is still going to work. You're not going to lose your aileron control. But if it broke, if the whole lead broke, then you would lose your aileron, because you would lose power to the servo, even though you're still getting signal and ground. Of course, signal for us being the yellow line. Okay, so I've got that together. It's not real pretty. It doesn't need to be pretty because the solder is going to hold it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my soldering iron, unplug it from the wall, clean the tip quickly, and I'm going to run back over with my solder. And I'm just going to get that joint buttoned up. Lead fumes. And that's one of the most critical steps of the process, guys. Then you get yourself some red tape, you cut off a little chunk of it, you cover that joint, and the next thing you know, you're almost done. And when I say almost done, I just got to do this for the tail still. A lot of times, if you haven't ever done it, you can use that bind plug as a point to grab some power from too, if you want to plug into the receiver, rather than doing like I'm doing. You can put a little Y cable or a 3-way splitter. You can get all the power for all your different LEDs. It's really a good place to grab some power, because then if you need to bind it, you just unplug it and stick your bind plug in, bind it, and then pull it back out. It's not a big deal. Okay, that's that. Now, we've got these two we got to settle, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually have those tapped at the same point. You see this little loop is going to be a problem. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay them flat like that, and you're saying, well, what the heck? You're going to have all this copper exposed. Yes, I am. And at this point, it shouldn't matter, but what I'll do is I'll stick a piece of heat shrink over it again. And then the copper and all this will line up a little bit thinner then, instead of having this big clump of two resistors on top of one another. So, okay guys, I'm using a piece of my least favorite heat shrink here. This stuff never shrinks worth a darn, but whatever. That's life in the big city. So now we can take our trusty lighter, not torch, and we can shrink this down. The shrink ratio on this white stuff is just crappy. So you end up almost always getting little burn marks on it. I hate that. Don't know if you guys have that same problem. There you go, burn marks. Okay, cool. So now that that's done, what we need to do is we need to take these two leads where they end. Hot! We're just going to twist them together. Because remember, we're coming off of the same negative for both of these LEDs. It doesn't matter what color, it doesn't matter what resistance, it just matters that they go back to the common point. So we'll clip that off, save it for a later use. That's right, I'm gonna save it. What a weirdo. So now I need to separate this brown lead. Luckily for us, it's on the top. As you can see, it's on the top of the wire, the servo wire. So now I just need to kind of get an idea of where this is gonna lie when it gets all laid back down. I happened to peel that back because it always looks like crap when you put it back down. But again, you're not gonna see it when you're flying. Not unless you have like, you know, Superman eyes. Okay, so here's another trick I learned. Take yourself a marker. Get where you think you need it. And then just do yourself a huge favor and mark the brown wire, because you are not going to be able to do this all at the same time. Not unless you have 10 hands. So, which I don't. All right, I'm going to get this next step kind of started and then I'll come back. Okay, had to use my sharp blade to separate this back, guys. I didn't want to miss that in the video. And one thing you're going to notice is, look at this. These things are barely going to fit in here, but luckily we're at the front part of my holes. So I can go ahead, and remember, I'm not stripping totally. I'm just going to bite. And then I'm going to pull back and expose the copper, and then we come back out. So luckily I don't have to go into the back part of my tool to do that. Okay, so now this step, make yourself a loop. It's a little harder because we're working with the end of servo leads. We're not working with just bare copper wire, which would be a lot softer and easier to bend and flex and all that. These aren't hard to bend or flex. They're just harder than copper wire. So now the other thing is, when you get that folded, be mindful that when you're done soldering this, it's going to either make a really sharp or bulky piece. So you want to get it as concise as you can, and bearing in mind that stuff is going to shrink back when you come in to solder it. So we'll go ahead and do an extreme close-up. All right, get soldering iron, clean the tip, unplug it from the wall, walk over with it, and just bring her in and get a little solder in there. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. All right, now, the last step. Before we do anything else, we are going to pause it. I'm going to get my battery plugged in. We're going to test it. Remember I said the next thing we're going to do is test it? Well, I forgot about this. So that's the next step you're going to do, is you're going to tape around it with a piece of black tape or brown tape or whatever color tape you want. And then we're going to test it with the battery. All right, got the battery, guys. And lucky for us, the lead on this battery, or on this airplane, is super long, so I can just reach over and plug it in from underneath. Oh, I see the light. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, I don't see the white light. Why do I not see the white light? I see the red light. There's the red light, guys. Wonderful. But what is going on with our white light? We have to find out now, guys. There is something not quite right. So I'm gonna push it out. Let's hope the LED didn't break, because it's a pain in the batoot to fix this. Yes, that's a pain in the butt. Okay, it's not broken. Our wire, it's all covered in heat shrink and stuff. So we'll do some little diagnostics and we'll figure this out. Guys, the LED broke. Son of a gun. So now I gotta basically resolder a freaking LED on right here. What a pain in the butt. Alright, at least we know what's wrong and we didn't have to go back and do it later. So anyway, I'm gonna just save you the trouble of seeing that horrible step of the video. And I'll go ahead and fix it and then come back to you when that's done. Alright guys. The painful and tedious process may be over. Here's the moment of truth. I'll just show you live. Oh yeah, she works. All right, good. So now we'll just make sure, yep, it's bright, obnoxiously bright. That's what I'm going for. And it doesn't turn on and off when I touch it. What happened was the contact evidently overheated and broke the last LED. These things are very, very small. It's like trying to take a pill, not a human pill, but like a pill for your dog, and mounting it with a soldering iron to your foam plane. Ah, I just broke it in half. Are you freaking kidding me? So anyway, gonna have to get kind of creative on this. Okay guys, one thing I've learned about making these things work is you got to be able to be a little bit creative. This is not foam safe. Make sure you don't get it on your foam. But the idea is what we can do is we can actually make this thing a little bit more robust, a little bit sturdier. And so we're going to use some kicker and some medium thickness CA just to make this stronger. It's just so weak. We'll just do that a couple of times, give a little extra thickness. It's going to protect the wires, and it's going to protect the copper from one another. Any smoke you think you see is the chemical reaction on the CA. So that's basically what we're going to do there. And here in a little bit, we'll actually be using CA on the front of the light too. But I just had so many problems with it, I've never had to replace two of them like that. You can see, you know, over here it's kind of the same thing, but obviously you're not going to use this, you're going to use a foam safe. So anyway, I'll come back to you here in a minute. Oh, one other thing, make sure that chemical reaction stops. And the best way I know, smell it. You'll know, because if you've worked with CA, you know the smell it has when it's still working. So I'm going to let that work for a little bit longer. We'll go ahead and unplug the battery. And actually, I might actually leave it plugged in on this one just because there's so much trouble I've had with these particular LEDs. And I don't want to find out that I broke it, get it all glued in, find out it's broken at the end. So, okay guys, this one over here, the next step is going to be for us to pull the LED out of the hole because it has worked its way in there a little bit in the process of getting the wires straight. So I'm using this wooden skewer just to kind of work this out. And we have the wires just on the bottom part there. So now that that's exposed, see it's just kind of sticking out a little bit. We're going to take this medium CA, foam safe this time, and we're just going to kind of work that into the first initial position, which is very critical. Foam safe, medium CA, and then kicker. And this is going to hold this light in the position exactly the way we want, and then we're going to fill in around it with CA. And don't worry about touching up your paint or any of that stuff yet. You'll have an opportunity to do that soon. But you just kind of want to get lights pointed the direction you want right now.